tell me, why do you think you should be the next Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner?
So I think after Mr Allott made his somewhat outrageous comments, that's the last PFCC, we saw a massive groundswell in North Yorkshire of people coming out, signing petitions, protesting, saying, actually, no, we need to take ending violence against women and girls seriously. And that's what I'm going to do. My entire manifesto talks about the ways in which, with a very specific plan, I'm going to make York and North Yorkshire safer for women and girls. So I think I should be the next PFCC, because until we have somebody with a very clear plan to prioritise this, at a time when there are 15 reports of domestic abuse in North Yorkshire every day, until we have that, we are never going to make the progress we need, and I'm the one with the plan to do it.
So what's in the plan? How are you going to do that?
So first and foremost, we're going to work to root out misogyny in the police force. So we know from people who work in the police force, but we also know from survivors who report crimes, that they don't feel they're taken seriously, that there are deep systemic issues here. So we're going to have an independent inquiry into misogyny in the North Yorkshire police force. That's first and foremost, so we can actually solve the problems here. But we're also going to look at how we support. So as a commissioner, you've got quite a big budget for commissioning local services. I will also be speaking to government and demanding more funding for independent domestic violence advocates and independent sexual violence advocates to ensure that when survivors come forward, they are supported throughout the investigative process. Because at the moment, we know that reports of sexual violence, rape, other violence against women and girls, they often feel they're not believed, they're often re-traumatised by the process, and we're never going to get the conviction rates up unless we can convince people that they're safe to come forward and that we will take their allegations seriously.
Do you stand the risk of becoming a single-issue party in this election?
So I hear this a lot in elections, and understandably, I can kind of see the point, but I think gender equality affects literally every element of our society. Yes, primarily I'm talking about ending violence against women and girls because I think this is a really key point in which North Yorkshire can make a serious change on this hugely important issue. But I think gender equality impacts every single element of the PFCC job. We know that, for example, women are underrepresented in the fire departments. We know that the police have a 19.4% gender pay gap at the moment. And if you weren't sure, it's Equal Pay Day today. So it's the day when women stop getting paid for their work in the UK. So all of these issues are really important. I think that gender comes into every single element of everything we do as politicians, and we need to accept that and stop making compromises on equality for everyone.
We're recording this on the 18th of November, we should say. You obviously are from the Women's Equality Party. If you were successful, you would be working among the existing political sphere where we've got a Conservative government. How would you see your relationship with them if you were to be successful?
So I have absolutely no qualms about going and telling politicians what it's actually like on the ground. As well as being deputy leader of the Women's Equality Party, I'm also a member of the British Medical Association Council. I'm a trade unionist. I've been out on picket lines as a junior doctor. I have negotiated contracts with the government. I'm very used to going into meetings with high-powered politicians and telling them what it's actually like on the ground. And those are skills and experiences that I think I'm pretty unique in having amongst all the candidates. And that's exactly what I would do in this role. I have no problems telling people that women and girls in North Yorkshire deserve better and that we need the funding to do that. Because as a public servant myself working in the NHS, our public services have been diabolically cut by this government and we need to make a change, and that's why we need to have somebody who does not have direct links to this government doing the PFCC job.
But is that in your power to convince them of that?
Yeah, it is. So the Association of PCCs come together and together we can have a lot of power and I can have a lot of influence over that group, but as well as going down to London and actually negotiating. So additional funding for independent domestic and sexual violence advocates, that is something that I can demand from the Ministry of Justice. So it's about kind of going and opening those relationships and highlighting the problems. Ideally, I want North Yorkshire to be a template for the rest of the country on how we tackle ending violence against women and girls.
So, I mean, you've come to visit us at the University of York today. Thank you very much for doing that. The Students' Union here wrote an open letter. Did you get a copy of that?
I did, and I was delighted to sign up to all the pledges of it. So much of it was, it was a fantastic pledge and letter.
So one of the points on that was about increasing confidence in the police force. How would you see that materialising?
So I think key to this is actually having a clear plan going in and building relationships. I am determined that we need to hear the voices of all York and North Yorkshire residents in their wide and broad diversity. And that very much includes students. So if I were to be elected, I would commit to coming and meeting with student unions on a quarterly basis myself. I would be working with our PCSOs, so police community support officers, to get one of them in every week, if not, or every month at the very minimum, because I think until we can build those relationships where students can come to us, ask us questions, report crimes, we are never going to rebuild that trust. So I want this to be the start of an open, talking relationship.
One of the other things on that letter was talking about the spiking situation we've seen recently. What's your thoughts about that?
So fundamentally, spiking is the result of a rape culture that we have in this society. And until we tackle that, we cannot tackle spiking. There is obviously a large policing element to how we address this, but we need to stop placing the onus on women to keep themselves safe. We used to tell women, oh, cover your drinks and that will stop your drink from being spiked. But now they've just moved to needle spiking. So it's not good enough to keep putting the onus on women and girls. We need to be working with local licence holders, bringing in student voices, the voice of the community that use York's nightclub scene, and also bringing police into that discussion to try and improve things. But fundamentally, this comes down to a wider societal picture. We need to get to a point where men don't feel it is ever appropriate to spike a drink, and that's going to take a lot of wider educational work.
So do you see working, how do you go about educating young people?
So I think the first thing is to build that relationship, to come and have conversations and to really understand. So often I left mainstream party politics because I was fed up of the very, very, well, generally white, cis, male, middle-aged voices that were dominating the narrative. I'm a queer wheelchair-using 34-year-old. I am not your average politician at all. And I think until we have politics that represents people, we are never going to be able to build those discussions and actually start the process of education and working out what an individual's priorities are. As a GP, if somebody comes to me with a question, I try and work out where they're coming from and their background first. And that's exactly what I would try and do as PFCC.
Would you be able to continue being a GP if you got the job, do you think?
So I would hope to try and maintain some contacts with the NHS, taking on locum shifts, doing occasional shifts, because I think it's really important. All of these public services work together, and having that kind of wide understanding. I'm very proud to have worked for the NHS. I'm very proud to be a GP in the NHS. And I think having that understanding of how the multidisciplinary team fits together is vitally important to this role. So I'd never want to stop doing that entirely, because I think it's a great link into the local community as well.
Now, one of the points which has come up in this election is about increasing diversity. You've mentioned it as already in the police and fire service. How would you go about doing that through recruitment without it seeming like it was tokenism?
Yeah. So I think this is a really important point. We've just seen an assistant chief constable being given a new role, which is fantastic. And he's coming from an ethnic minority background. So I think it's about having those kind of senior leadership roles. I'm very much a subscriber to the you cannot be what you cannot see theory. And I know that, you know, as a disabled woman working in health, I had to work incredibly hard to get to a point where people would take me seriously as a clinician in the NHS. And I don't want life to be as hard for other people. So I think it's about kind of creating that visibility within the police force and having those conversations and making sure that fundamentally, if we can go back to that independent inquiry into misogyny and ensuring that we actually break down the systemic barriers to diversity in the police and fire services that already exist, we can then try and bring in a more diverse cohort into the employment structures, because until people know that they are going to be safe and well supported at work, they are not going to want to join the workforce.
Broadcasting to York University. You are why.